Digital Experience Initiative. We'll have Jonathan Adams from the Phase 2 team talk about Acquia personalization and how we use that to improve the experience for Webster's customers. Emily White from Phase 2 will be taking us under the hood of the new digital experience and the tools and technologies we use to bring this to life. And then we'll come full circle back to Todd so he can tell us a little bit about the impact the new digital experience has made for Webster and its customers. So from right to left, first we have Todd Purcell, Head of Digital Banking and Marketing. Head of Digital Banking, Marketing, and Experience at Webster Bank. So Todd will be bringing the voice of the client. We have Emily White, Vice President of Marketing from Phase 2. And Jonathan Adams, Software Architect and Acquia Personalization Expert. Todd, why don't you set the stage for us in terms of Webster Bank as an entity and why Webster decided to embark on this journey?
Great, thanks, Chris, and welcome to everyone. I appreciate you joining our session. So to give you some background, I've been at Webster Bank for a little over 4.5 years, and when I first joined, I knew that there was a tremendous opportunity to really reimagine WebsterBank.com, but it wasn't the right time to go and do that, on the first day of my job. And so really building the case for change for a couple of years was important to get the entire organization behind it. And why was I building a case for change? It was because WebsterBank.com is the most heavily visited digital store, we call it, at the bank by far, with 36 million annual interactions coming into the site. So we knew there was tremendous volume coming to the site, to an experience that really was largely flat and really did not engage that customer. And that site was about maybe 4 or 5 years before I joined, went through a refresh, but really a very light refresh and not an exhaustive reimagining. So we knew we had a tremendous amount of volume. We had most of our customers coming into the site were going really to log in, to go and visit their account to service, which was important, but they weren't engaging with WebsterBank.com. So we knew we had to really reimagine that, to capture those 36 million interactions, get them to the service store where they wanted to go, but also appropriately to start a conversation with those customers and prospects to tell about the depth and breadth of products and services we have. We are a mid-sized bank with the full breadth and depth of services across the consumer side of the house, small business, and our commercial customers. But we weren't engaging them. So we built the concept of initially really what was called Project You Know Me, and it was really much around what Jonathan's going to talk about. It's really, how do you engage customers for personalization? How do you get them to understand our services based on their intent? And so we initially thought of the idea about Project You Know Me, and that really resonated with the CFO because it was really about revenue generation. But then we changed it because we knew this was an opportunity to really reimagine the site, not just for revenue, but really for customer satisfaction and for engagement, for employees and for customers. And we changed the name internally to Project Beacon. And that was important because that gave the organization a sense of really, Beacon is a light to guide someone to where they're going. And WebsterBank.com reimagining was really to guide someone, to tell them where to go, to help them navigate our services, to engage the customer in a really meaningful, relevant conversation.
Thanks, Todd. Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about Acquia personalization and how that played a role into the new Webster Bank digital experience?
Yeah, for sure. So at Phase 2, we use atomic and component-based design principles to build websites and to build these applications, have these really nice, engaging user interfaces. We do that by defining a library of reusable components or blocks in this instance that can be configured and arranged and placed by editors throughout the page. And this approach became a lot easier with the advent of the layout builder being in Drupal core. And naturally, this approach fit really well with Acquia's personalization tool. And one thing that we really strive to do at Phase 2 is to think about the users who are going to be using the tool. Think about the people who are using this tool day in and day out. And we never want the tool to get in the way. We don't want to just install the tool and call it a day. So one of my actual passions is to think about the users who are going to be using that application and kind of tailor it to them, tailor it to their skill set, and tailor it to their daily needs. And again, when you think about this, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be this giant overhaul. We don't need to install this brand new admin theme and things like that. It can be really small and simple things that help people day to day. It could be things like simple help text underneath a field that just says, hey, this is what this field does. Or little bits of imagery added throughout the admin that says, okay, this is the block that we're rendering. Here are the various fields and things like that. So that's one of the things, and that's one of the approaches that we took with this Acquia personalization tool. We took something that was already amazing, something that was just absolutely awesome, and we actually tailored it to our users to make it easier for them to use. And as it stands, Acquia personalization currently has 2 ways to define slots for these dynamic content to live. The first is this CSS point and click selector. And what this does, it actually allows you to use your mouse and hover over a specific section of the page to define what's called a slot. And a slot is where that dynamic content lives. And if you've been using Drupal for a while, you know that back in the days of panels or back in the days of some of these other like layout tools, Drupal can actually be really heavy on the markup side of things. So there can be a lot of extra divs, there can be a lot of extra wrappers, a lot of extra containers for these pieces of content. And normally, while this isn't an issue, it presented a little bit of an issue for us. One thing that we did notice was some of our less technical and less savvy users were actually having trouble using this CSS point and click selector. So what was happening was they were actually having trouble selecting the correct element to be replaced. So this meant that editors could potentially select the wrong portion of the page. And then when we actually did the personalization, the page wouldn't display properly. There's another way to define these slots within Acquia personalization, and that's using the embedded div option. And again, while this is a totally reasonable approach, it didn't necessarily suit our use case because we were no longer able to have that default content inside of that block unless we defined a default segment within Experience Builder. So what we actually did to get around this was we actually came up with a hybrid approach that was kind of tailored to our users, tailored to their actual specific use case. What we actually did was we did an audit of all of the various blocks that we had that we were going to be able to personalize. And what we did was we actually added a field to all of those blocks and we gave an arbitrary name. In this case, it was the data lift slot. So what we did was we actually took a pre-processed function. And what we did was we said, we took the value of that field and we rendered it as a data attribute on the div. So what this approach does is actually mimics the embedded div approach that Acquia personalization provides out of the box, while still allowing us to have our content rendered specifically in the right place. So just to kind of recap, this tiny bit of code that we added allowed us to be able to define slots. So the general workflow was you would have a slot, you would define a slot using that embedded code method, right? And then you would take that data lift slot attribute, you would copy it, and you'd paste that copied value into the block inside of Drupal, inside of that field that we talked about earlier, and then would use that to replace it. You would save the block, replace it, and then continue with creating the campaign. And while this wasn't a huge or life-changing fix that we did, it actually improved the quality of life for our editors. It allowed them to do something and allowed them to give them the confidence to be able to know that they were selecting the exact portion of the page that they wanted to replace and do things properly. So they were able to create campaigns with these after that.
Thanks, Jonathan. And as a site editor myself, I appreciate that workaround. We've been on the Phase2 site, so I also appreciate your work there. Next, we're going to segue to Emily, who's going to, for the technologists with us today, she's going to tell us a little bit about the tools and technologies under the hood of the new Webster Bank.
Yeah, and I do know that Drupal 8 and Acquia personalization is really the spotlight of what we're talking about today. But in addition to that, there were several other products that we did implement under the hood for this project. So you can read all about them on this slide. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the important part to really understand about this is the intentionality in bringing these solutions together to create a seamless experience for the customer and for the employees at Webster, as Jonathan mentioned too. So it wasn't just about an opportunity to upgrade. It's what Todd said. It's an opportunity to reimagine and find the right products that in combination support the goals of what they were trying to do at Webster. So when Todd kind of talks about that vision of connection anytime, anywhere, it's not about blasting Webster into customers' lives. It's about access to Webster when and how the customer wants to be reached, right? So that vision is what led Phase 2 to make the technical decisions that they made and to support that customer-centric movement that he's been talking about, building up over time. So what Webster really understands is that opening a checking account isn't the special feature about Webster. What's special about Webster is the long-term customer relationships. That's what's special. So Todd really, with his team, did a couple things up front that I wanted to mention that kind of led us into this place, which is opening your eyes to brands outside of the industry that have set the expectation for the customer. And so whether it be things like playlists or loyalty programming and the big brands that do recommendation engines like Netflix, right? That really promotes this idea of having the customer be able to reach Webster anytime, anywhere. So I think that's something that's pretty amazing about this. And also the promotion of scalability and consistency up front. So I think they called it on the team freedom within the framework, right? So this allows the customers to visibly see the aim of Project Beacon, which is to trust that they're getting the right information to make important decisions about their lives. And that's what we really care about. So that's why they implemented the design system using Particle, right? Because it allows them to take those Lego blocks and assemble things quickly, but not compromise the integrity of the work, right? So that plus the integration of Salesforce was really imperative to emphasize that importance of communication and information sharing between the bank and the customer. So what's the beauty of this under the hood piece to me is that you can't cut corners in this sector. Like you have to build it right so that it evolves with the needs of the customer. And it was really impressive that, Webster really took that to heart and implemented the right way. So it's not just a nice thing to build trust with your customers. It's obviously really good for business. So I'll let Todd kind of tell you a little bit more about the results and the outcome of the project.
Great. Thanks, Emily. When you look back at it, really it was about a 18-month journey, and as I mentioned, a couple years even to get to the starting point of that journey. But it has been a tremendous success for Webster Bank. Project Beacon, arguably the largest digital engagement we've ever been on. Phase 2 has been a tremendous partner. Acquia has been a tremendous partner with us. And you think about what the successes are. So we started the journey knowing that we had to re-engage customers, as I mentioned, and Emily also reinforced. That was important. But we also knew we needed to re-platform. So just re-platforming from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 by itself would be success. That was a big win for us. Building the design system by itself would have been success, but that was just another big piece of it. Ultimately, reimagining the 1,500 pages of content throughout the site and rethinking the content and really rewriting every single word in a meaningful way to ensure that it had a connection with the customer was important. And we did all of that. And we looked at really driving internal operational efficiency. So, and we've achieved that with all the reasons of upgrading the design system. Now we've gone from a site that was largely static and, as I mentioned, not touched for many, many years to a site now that is dynamic. And every week we have a content update. Every 2 weeks we have a code release. So that is a tremendous leap forward for Webster Bank to ensure we're meeting the evolving needs of our customers through this incredibly important touch point. But we also track, though, specific KPIs for what we call the health of the digital store. And we track 4 KPIs. We track sessions, we track average time on site, we track pages per session, and leads. Leads is the most important one because ultimately it is about driving e-commerce, ultimately to engage that customer, deepen relationship, and bring on new customers to the bank. So think about sessions. We've seen a 5.5% increase in sessions. That's important for driving. We've seen average time on the site be flat. We think that's important because while sessions increase, people are not spending more time because they're finding what they need to find quickly through better navigation, through better content. And we've seen pages per session decrease as well, which is, again, they're not hunting now, they're finding what they need to find, and they're going on to their daily life. What's most important is leads. So we've seen a 65% increase in leads. That is tremendous. That's a home run. Because again, it's about driving a meaningful connection, but ultimately to drive e-commerce. So by all measures, Project Beacon has been a tremendous success internally for our employees, and a tremendous success for our customers as we engage them. And we're also seeing some great industry accolades. We've received a couple of awards, and we know we're a finalist for the Engage Award. So we fingers crossed that we also get this one too.
Thank you, Todd. So we did leave a couple of minutes for questions. So if you do have a question, feel free to throw it in the chat window, and I'll take a look and get them to our panel here. Todd, while we're waiting for a question, in terms of obviously the pandemic, I know this project started long before that. So, can you tell us a little bit about that? Did that impact anything midway, or was there any, pivot that your team made due to COVID-19?
Yeah, Chris. It was actually probably right at the most important moment when in terms of the project and getting to the next phase is we started to really go live with understanding what actually was being released and built from a code perspective into our environment happened almost right at the day that we went virtual. So that was, so I would be lying if I said that I didn't have some concerns about that, because even though we had a dispersed team tapping into Phase 2's approach from dispersed folks across the US actually, but we also know we had important times where we were coming together. And obviously, from an internal perspective and also with our partner, we couldn't do that. So there were some nervous moments in the first week or so. But when you think about what we were able to accomplish in a completely remote environment, with frankly, technology at Webster really wasn't quite there to support us. But we did a tremendous amount in that very, very unusual time, with also just uncertainty for our employees, as you can imagine, on a personal life. But they were able to really, I think, connect and achieve. And we did not see a hiccup at all during COVID. And we launched on June 21st, right in the early days of the pandemic, and with a high level of employee engagement. So we were able to weather the storm during those early days, for sure.
Well, thank you for that honesty, and transparency into what that was like. I do have a question from Darren Harper, who asks, did the Vue.js calculators leverage the CMS?
Yes, I was actually back chatting with one of the developers on that project. And yeah, actually that was stored with Drupal, but it came through REST API that we're able to consume within Vue.js.
Awesome, thank you, Jonathan. And also a question from Paul, how did Webster and Phase 2 start working together?
I can take this one, and this one is appropriate considering what we're sitting in right now, is that we were introduced by Acquia. So this was a great opportunity here to tout that our relationship with Acquia has been really beneficial for Phase 2 and for Webster. So yeah, thanks for the introduction, Acquia.
I feel like that's almost too perfect of a segue to not
right. I was like, did somebody plan that question? I don't know.
Yeah, and we're at 1 minute to go, so I feel like I'm gonna take that win. But obviously, to everyone who joined us today, thank you so much. I know the recording will become available after the conference is over. Thank you to our partners at Acquia. Thank you to Todd and the team at Webster Bank for their trust, and we're so thrilled to bring this site to life. So, in the meantime, enjoy the rest of the conference, and please stop by the virtual booth, Phase 2's virtual booth, if you'd like to learn more about the Webster Bank initiative, and we'd be happy to talk. All right, take care, everybody.
Great, thanks, Chris. Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chris.